Hey Aspire Leaders, I hope you are having a fantastic weekend. Just got back from sunny California for the Vibe EDU event with Kim Gamarose, and I had such a wonderful time. It's so hard to explain just how incredible this community is. The venue was beautiful, and Kim did such a phenomenal job of creating this really amazing space for everyone to learn, collaborate, and get some real strategies to kick off the school year. It was also a true honor to meet my longtime friend, Mitch Weathers, and then also do a panel discussion with him on executive functioning and, of course, a lot of material from the new book, The Language of Behavior. So huge shout out to Kim Gamarose and her crew as they put on such an amazing event. I hope everyone saw it on social media. And of course, Kim has some really big plans for the future with this event, again, next summer for 2026. So stay tuned for details. Of course, with all my travels, last week you heard the first episode of Vibe EDU, so hopefully you enjoyed that content with myself, Kim, Mitch, and of course TJ Very. If the content resonated with you and you want to hear more, of course, we'd love for you to jump into your podcast platform or on YouTube and make sure that you're subscribed or following for additional content. Today, actually, Vibe EDU episode 6 drops, so make sure that you check that out as we're talking through this series on teacher evaluations. So for this week, super excited to push this out because this is our annual conversation. This is with Darrin Peppard. His podcast, Leaning into Leadership, is phenomenal. Make sure you check that out. And we're doing a shared episode, so it's dropping on his podcast and mine for both of our communities as we're trying to set things up for our educational leaders for the new school year. Because as we know, the work doesn't stop during the summer, and folks are getting back to the campuses, back into the district, to make plans for professional development, for campus goals, for their own initiatives for the upcoming school year. And so we wanted to make sure that we were providing some insight on some things to consider as a leader preparing for the new school year. So with that, here's our conversation talking through why leadership starts with clarity. Welcome to Aspire to Lead, where we empower educators and school leaders to grow, inspire, and thrive. I'm your host, Joshua Stamper, author, speaker, and leadership coach, bringing you conversations that spark transformation, challenge the status quo in education, and equip you to make a lasting impact on your campus or in your district. For more information and resources, visit joshstamper.com as we're looking to ascend to new leadership heights together. Welcome back, everyone, to Aspire to Lead and Leaning into Leadership with Darrin Peppard and Joshua Stamper, as we are doing once again. I think, Darrin, this is an annual thing now as we're kicking off the school year where we're doing a shared episode and talking about things that we need to be maybe focused on, thinking about some aha moments for our admin as we looked at the calendar and realized that folks are already going back to campuses, already getting involved with their counselors and other staff members as they're preparing for the new school year. And I know, Darrin, you were just at a school and helping them. So do you want to kind of set the stage for the topic that we're going to be covering today?
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to do this again. Yes, this has become an annual event. I think this is the third time. Maybe, I'm not sure. We've done this several times. I'll say that. And always look forward to sitting down and having conversations with you and talking leadership with you. So yeah, what we were talking about before we hit record, and I think what would make a great topic for us today is it's time. And people are coming back in the buildings as we're sitting here recording this. A couple of schools that I have spent a tremendous amount of time with in Virginia this entire summer had their very first staff meetings with all staff back today. And I'm finding it, in a way, a little bit unbelievable that we're at that point. You had shared before we hit record about the blog post that I did last week on clarity, what leaders should be doing now before the staff showed up. And I pushed out that blog on Friday of last week. And Josh, it wasn't 10 minutes. And I got a reply from somebody who was talking about, like, my opening line is something like, hey, in the next few weeks, your staff will be coming back. And that person said, few weeks, try Monday. My staff is here Monday. So, I mean, let's do what we can to help those school leaders who either your staff is just coming back or maybe you've still got another week or two. I think it'd be great to just kind of talk about some things that leaders can do to be best prepared to support their staff and set them up for success.
Yeah, I was just talking with a counselor. They just got back in session and they have a brand new principal and they've never been a principal before. And although they have a lot of knowledge as far as being an administrator, I know that they were working through some of the things as far as like, what do I even do to begin with my staff? And we can maybe start with this as far as like, for our leaders setting up the school year, they were even thinking about like, What's my vision as far as expectations on the campus? What are our goals for the year? And like, how do we measure that also, within that goal? And I know some of these are kind of hitting on some of the blog posts that you had pushed out. It was well done, by the way, Darrin. So for everyone that's listening, make sure you go and find that. And maybe we can put it in the show notes too, Darrin, as far as a link.
Yeah, absolutely.
Folks. But I think it's a great reminder. It doesn't matter if you're a new leader or a veteran leader. It's just a good reminder of things that sometimes we forget in the busyness. And then also that checklist. One of the things with administrators coming back is the district comes in right away and provides PD, but then they also say, oh, these are all the district initiatives, or these are the state initiatives and things that you need to comply with and get done. I don't know about you, but I remember vividly of frantically looking at my PD 2 weeks with my staff going, where on earth am I going to fit that in? It would have been nice to know earlier that was going to take up some of my time. And then you're scrambling to kind of reshuffle the deck as far as, what the schedule looks like for staff when they come back. But yeah, where do you want to start with our starting point for not only our conversation, but where administrators should be looking at when they're coming back to the office?
Well, I think you bring up a really interesting point, and this is true of both new leaders and also returning leaders. But let's maybe lean a little bit further into those brand new leaders, because when you first get the keys to the school, our mutual friend Todd Bloomer would say, spend 5 minutes, put your feet up on the desk, and say, yes, I made it. And then after 5 minutes, get your feet off the desk and get to work, because there's a lot to do. And sometimes you're not sure where to start. I know that was true for me. And I had been in that building. It's not like I came from a different building. But I think first and foremost, with all of what you shared, and here comes these district initiatives, and here comes all these other asks and this kind of thing, just try to define what success might look like in the coming year. And maybe just think about, what do you see as possible this year? When you're brand new to a school, I don't think you can look at data or those types of things and accurately say, this is what I think is possible. I think what is possible for a brand new leader in a brand new school might be, I want to focus on relationships. I want to focus on ensuring that everybody on the staff feels that, they're part of this. One of the schools that I work with, their number one big what's possible this year is staff inclusion. They want every staff member to feel like, hey, I'm welcome here. I'm valued here. What I do here matters. So I think just figuring out what success could look like for you instead of going to a list of tasks, because I can give you a list of tasks. I can write 200 for you right now, but those aren't going to necessarily set you up for success or do anything to move the needle.
No, it's hard coming in. I can think of plenty of campuses that I went into, and you assume like every role is going to be the same, and to a degree there are tasks and procedures that are the same, but every district is different, every school is different, every student body is different, every teaching and staff is different. And so when you come in, you obviously as the leader want to have a voice, but at the same time, a lot of times you don't even understand what the culture is, what they've experienced prior to, if it was a positive experience or a negative experience with the previous administration, and how that is going to impact you, because it will. If they had a wonderful and glowing relationship with the last principal, well, obviously they're going to miss that, right? And you're going to be compared to that person. If it was someone that they were glad to see leave, well, you're going to get the benefit of the doubt, so it might look nice.
You'll still be compared, just in a different way.
You'll still be compared.
Yeah.
So all that being said is like, you don't have that historical data piece. Like you may have the numbers as far as like student scores and whatnot, but you don't really truly have like this historical component of like what happened prior to you. And so it takes some time to get that from all stakeholders, the parents, the community, the teachers, the students. And so, I always felt comfortable probably about year 3. I know that sounds really, really long, and it is, but it takes some time for you to not only understand what's going on and where they've been, but then also taking that information to then construct a goal that's obtainable and moving toward your vision. So I think just patience, grace to yourself of taking that time to, yes, you celebrate that, like you said, put your feet up, celebrate, but also like the work is more about what you're talking about as far as building trust and building strong, healthy relationships with those that you're working with, but then also getting an understanding of what's happened in the past to make an informed decision moving forward.
I think that's a really important point. Understanding what has happened in the past, understanding both the successes and maybe the shortcomings that have transpired over however many of years that you want to collect that information. And I think some of that depends on how long your predecessor was there. So if you're coming into a building like when I became a high school principal, my predecessor had been there for 17 years as the building principal. And yes, I worked with him for 5 years. So I knew a lot of, that background. So my schema was pretty strong in that building. If you're coming into a building where you're going to be the fifth principal in 3 years or sixth principal in 8 years or something like that, you probably don't have to dig as deep because there's probably a lot of that same thing. And a caution I think I might share, and I think I've shared this on my show before here in the last few weeks. If you are brand new, don't jump and go running after the first thing you hear from the first person who comes into your office, because the first 4 or 5 who come in your office were probably the ones who were the first 4 or 5 in the office for the last person, and they have, let's say, a motive. Let's say they have a purpose for being the first ones there. Doesn't mean you shouldn't trust them. It doesn't mean you shouldn't build a relationship with them, but it does mean don't just go chase the first thing they tell you.
Yeah. Well, and I had a superintendent that came, he was brand new, wasn't from the district, and there were a lot of folks that were worried because he doesn't know what's happened before. It's like that whole tradition and legacy that has been built over time. You're an outsider coming in. But to his credit, he always said, don't knock down the fence until you know why it was built, right? And there's plenty of examples of administrators coming in brand new and not knowing the situation, not knowing why things are in existence, and then making a rash decision to put their stamp on it, to say, I'm the leader, this is my call, this is the way I want to move forward, and then regretting that quickly once they get information from other folks. And there's plenty of examples of that. But I think what you're saying too is don't just listen to a couple people and then make your decision making. You actually got to take some time, which is hard. I'm going to say that firsthand. It was extremely hard to be patient and to gather as much information and data as possible prior to making some decisions. But, to that fence analogy, you knock it down and then there's a bunch of crazy wild dogs on the other side of that fence. Well, you're going to be regretting that decision pretty fast.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think in addition to, just identifying what success might be is, you've got to maybe just figure out 2 or 3 things at most that you're going to try to focus on during that particular year. You've mentioned relationships quite a few times. I think, I've mentioned relationships. I think that's certainly something, no matter how long you've been a part of your school, whether you're brand new or you've been there for 20 years, you should continue to focus on relationships. Obviously, your students are new. They're not the same students that were there 20 years ago. So, you should continue to lean into those relationships, but then maybe find 2 or 3 other things that at most you're going to say, look, these are going to be my big rocks, if you want to use that phrase, or this is going to be my focus, or as a team, this is what we're going to really lean into in terms of doing that work. What might be a couple of things, Josh, you can think of that as a newer leader, you could still say, hey, these are the focuses for the year without having a ton of that schema like we were talking about?
Well, so for instance, I was hired as an assistant principal on one campus because they wanted student behavior protocols to be completely redone and changed. And so they knew the work that I had done in previous campuses and wanted me to implement that. So that was easy for me, because I had already done it. It was successful. I was very confident in that. So yes, the relationship building was key because I'm trying to implement a new system. And if they don't know who I am, don't know my motives, don't trust me, obviously anything they say is going to fall to the wayside, right? So I had to really do that kind of quickly, if I'm being honest, because I did make some pretty drastic changes in the sense of what student discipline looked like. Now the matrix too, student matrix had to be redone, and I had to try to have a collaborative way of doing that to get other stakeholders involved with that so that they understood this isn't just me top down dictating this onto you. Let's do this for the best for the students. And so that was an easy thing. But even saying that, I knew what my goals were. I knew why I was there. I agreed with it, but at the same time, it took a really long time to massage that idea and to make those changes where it was universal for all staff. Even by saying that, like, that was an easy answer to state, but as far as the process goes, it was a long runway. It took years for me to get it to the place that I felt like we were all on the same page. We had all the same language. We had all the same procedures. We were in agreement. I had plenty of data to show that it was working. We didn't have repeat offenders. We had more time in the classroom. We saw a correlation between student behavior and grades. So like there was a lot that came with that, but it also took time, it took experience, and it took a lot of teaching and relationship building with that to make it occur. So that was the first thing that came to mind.
I think, though, that's a really important point, because if we're not going in with the right mindset and understanding, hey, this is going to take some time, things aren't going to just change overnight. Behavior is a really great example. And it's something that I think a lot of schools, a lot of individuals they're challenged with that right now. They're trying to find better ways to not just manage behavior, but, to set expectations, to, help teach students about how to self-regulate and, how to understand, their own triggers and all of those types of things. And that does not happen overnight. I'll go with an example from the instructional standpoint that very, very similar. A lot of schools will ask me about, frequency of time that administrators should be in the classroom and how administrators should be coaching and growing their teachers. 100% very important role as a school leader. That's a big part of what you should be doing. But how do you build that culture? Especially as a new leader, if you come into a situation where teachers aren't used to administrators coming in the classroom on a regular basis, you've got to just simply build that culture so that they understand when you come in the classroom, you're not coming in with a got you mentality, that you're coming in with I want to support you. I'm here to learn. I'm coming in to be curious, not judgmental. That takes time, but it also takes from the front end, what is it? And this is work that you should be doing right now. What is it that I want to be looking for when I go in? Mm-hmm. I remember when I very first started as a school leader, myself and one of the other assistant principals, about 2 Fridays a month, we would find that, it's Friday afternoon. Things are kind of, winding down. Let's go pop into classrooms. And that's what we did. He and I just went and popped into classrooms and just sat high and visited with teachers and visited with kids. And the teachers loved that. It really did. The kids loved it. We didn't really have an agenda at that time. A couple years later, we finally got around to, all right, when we come in the classroom, we're going to look for this. We're going to look for this. We're going to look for this. If you want to begin with that, that's fine. Just make sure you really are clear with your teachers from the beginning. If you want to focus on improving instruction, and maybe it's through engagement, or maybe it's, rigorous instruction, or maybe it's we want to see student interaction. We really want to, see collaboration happening with students. Whatever the thing is that you say, this is what we want to focus on, then when you go in the classrooms, look for that and give feedback specifically on that. Give ways that they can continue to grow. When you see exemplars, share that out. So right now, I would say it's definitely important to be getting that clarity around what do I want to see in the classroom and how am I going to give feedback on that, if that makes some sense.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I think that's something that's, like you were talking about, I can think of plenty of opportunities that I went into classrooms and felt great about it. But then when I walked out, I was like, was I strategic? Was I intentional with that visit? Did I provide any feedback? And there were a lot of times that didn't occur. I was just, trying to make sure that my presence was in the classroom and that I maybe got a quick thing in the computer system to say that I went in there.
Right.
And, check that box. And so I think if there is an overarching topic, theme, initiative that you're trying to implement on the campus, that it is, like you talked about in their blog, as far as that clear communication. What does it look like? What is that example of exemplary? How should it be executed in the classroom? What is the evidence of that? And then, of course, we used to do it as sometimes like a backwards design. So like, if that was like an overarching topic, and fill in the blank as to what you were talking about, what if it's, student collaboration and what that looks like in the classroom? Well, if that's the overarching thing, what is it about that would you like me to come in and view and provide feedback, right? Because sometimes the topics are just this huge umbrella. And so let's scale it down. Let's get a microscope on it. And then once you identify what it is that you may feel like is a weakness or something that you want to practice, well, then I know exactly what I'm looking for when I'm in there. So I don't need to be in there for 45 minutes. I can be in there 5 minutes and I can still see what you want. You're dictating when I'm coming in. And again, it's not a gotcha. It's just me coming in and viewing it and giving a different perspective on what's occurring in the classroom. And as you know, as a teacher, Darrin, I mean, we're doing 1,000 things in a very short period of time. And sometimes we don't see everything that's happening, right? We might not see Johnny and Sally in the back, not paying attention to what's going on as far as collaboration. Maybe everyone's on task, but they're in the back or they're off task. Well, as far as administrator, it's not like I'm getting on the teacher and saying, oh, you did a terrible job. But I still can highlight the fact that not everyone was on task during the collaboration piece of that. And that's my feedback, right? So I think it's part of that trust too, of allowing the teacher to have control over the situation. They're dictating what I'm looking at. They're dictating the time. They're dictating, as far as what it is that they feel like they need to grow in. And then they're also, of course, getting the feedback that they want specifically. So I can think of other strategies too, but that came to mind when you were talking about, trying to, support, but then also I think you can also allow them to have more of a place in that process where they feel ownership in it. And I think that's powerful as a new leader.
I like that a lot. And I want to just build on that just a little bit. So yes, and I think allowing maybe, a small menu or, it's one thing for us as administrators to say, this is what I want to see in every classroom every day, but giving the teacher also the latitude to say, Josh, I would really love it if you came in 3 days in a row, different class periods, and help me with how I'm opening the class. So 5 minutes. 3 times during the week. Let's just talk about what I'm doing for an opening activity. I just don't really feel like I'm starting strong. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's, hey, can you come and help me with my closure? And then let's work together and brainstorm ways that I can get a little bit of feedback from my students at the end of a lesson, or how can I do a better job of setting success criteria for students to start the lesson, or whatever it is, right? But when teachers have an opportunity to say, I kind of think I need a little help here, or I'd love to get your feedback on this, man, all of a sudden you start to open that door. And instead of you're going in the class and it's, oh boy, the administrator's here.
Jump up from your desk and go help a kid real quick.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Fall out of your chair. Yeah, for sure. But no, I think that's big, and I appreciate that you went there, because I think the more that we give teachers voice in that, again, it's one of those things that I think leads to modeling in the classroom. If we're modeling for our teachers, hey, I want to help you in an area where you feel you need that support, then they should be doing the same thing with their students when they see us doing that. So I think that's really, really cool. And I want to circle back though to something that you had touched on in there that I think is something most administrators struggle with. And that's the communicating expectations. You mentioned the blog. I said something in the blog like, you cannot over communicate your expectations, but you touched on it. So maybe I'll just throw it back in your direction, but talk about that. Cause again, I see that as something so many people struggle with.
Well, I think especially if you're a teacher and you now are moving into administration, I think you just assume too much. So for instance, you think like common knowledge is common to everyone, and it's not always so common, right? So like, for instance, going back to that initiative with student discipline, the word consequences, let's just use that as an example. I assumed everyone had the same definition for the word consequences, or the same terminology in regards to discipline. Well, what I quickly found out was that it was drastically different from teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher. So we actually had to and this is sounding elementary, but we literally had to break it down to, when I use the term consequences, this is what it means. Moving forward, when anyone uses the word consequences, this is what it's going to mean. Because we had, what it seemed was a warped view of what those words were. And so let's get back to the true meaning of it, and understanding that we're not getting the guillotine in the middle of the hallway when a student makes a mistake. Because that's what we're getting at, is I'd never want to see the student again, kick them out of school. And sometimes it was just multiple days of low-level infractions. It's like, okay, let's back it up, right? So all that being said is like my Achilles heel there was that I just assumed too much as an administrator. And so, especially as a new leader. So don't assume, for one. Second of all, define what things are, even if it seems simple. And then third, as far as the expectation moving forward, like what that is for all people and having some accountability with that too. It may come down to having some crucial conversations that are uncomfortable, but they need to occur because you need to have all staff doing the right thing for kids. And so for myself, there were some really uncomfortable conversations that need to happen that, some folks were like, I don't agree with this part. Let's work through this as far as why I don't. And then I could, have a rebuttal and have a dialogue with them that was respectful and coming to the end result of this is what's best based on what I'm providing as far as data, what I'm providing as far as research, things, past experiences, and why maybe it went sideways. And if we would have done X, Y, and Z, it would have made a better product and a learning environment for that child to make better decisions in the future. So I think all those things need to occur both at a grander scale as far as the campus, but then also you might have to have those one-on-one conversations to reiterate the expectations and how we're moving forward too.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on with that. And it takes me back to something I said a couple of minutes ago with you have to model what you expect. And when you make the assumption, I said it once, they should know it. It's no different than what we don't want our teachers doing in the classroom, which is I taught it, they didn't learn it. So how about as leaders, we take some of our own advice and communicate. Find multiple avenues to share whatever it is that you expect. You shared some great things on the behavioral side. I'll stick to it on the instructional side. Maybe there's something that you have in terms of an expectation around lesson plans. Maybe there's something you have around an expectation of cooperative work with students. Maybe there's an expectation you have around how your PLCs will meet and work and utilize data. Yep. If you only say it on your opening staff meeting and you never talk about it again, I promise you, they don't know what you said. You've got to go back to it. And again, like I said, have multiple avenues. It's one thing to do a presentation, maybe, have a printed staff handbook or a digital staff handbook. Have those meetings in your PLCs where you're going back through and checking for understanding to make sure they know what it is that you really expect of them and how you expect them to function. If there's something very specific that you are working on, say, I've mentioned it a couple of times, let's go with engagement. Maybe you say, hey, I want better engagement in classrooms. That is a very weak statement. Instead, talk about engagement, give very crystal clear examples, model what you expect that engagement to look like in your staff meetings. So don't stand and deliver and then tell them don't go stand and deliver. You've got to make sure that you are modeling for them what you expect them to do in the classroom. And just continue to check in. Don't just do it in your opening staff meeting. Come back to it. Because here's something that I learned, Josh, over many, many years as a school and district leader. Your staff, they're watching. They watch everything you do. And if you model the things you want them to do, odds are pretty strong they're going to do it. Maybe not right away, but over time. They start to emulate the behavior of the leader that they believe in, that they trust, and that they respect. A simple example. Many schools this year will open up the doors to their staff, and in their opening staff meeting, they're going to say, I expect my teachers to greet students at the door. And in some of those schools, the administrator will be in their office when the school day starts. Why? Sure. What are you doing? Get your butt to the front door. If you're going to tell them, I expect you to greet students at the door, then you better go greet students at the door. Mm-hmm. This was a shift for me. When I first started as school leader, I didn't greet kids at the door. You've heard the story. My audience has heard the story. Your audience has heard the story. So I don't need to tell the story of two roads. But when I started showing up at the front door, it didn't take very long. And I started having other staff show up at at the front door of the school with me. And you know what? They did a lot better job of greeting kids at the door of their classrooms not just because I modeled it, but that was a part of it, right? You build it into your culture. So whatever it is that you're saying you expect, if you just say, do this on opening day, and then you never talk about it again, they're not going to do it. And I can give you seriously easily 10 examples of me doing that wrong and those things never happening in my building. So fortunately, I can give you a lot of good examples of me doing it right and it happening in the building. But I just think that the whole over communication piece isn't always about what you say. A lot of it is about what you do.
No, and I think just to add on, like you did earlier, is the checkpoints. We had strategically placed certain communication, and that could be a lot of different ways. We would try to utilize email and sending out videos and having our different meetings and popping in either our leadership meetings, popping into our PLCs, popping into our subject matter meetings, whatever, to just highlight things like don't forget, right? And as the year goes on, Darrin, you know this, things start to slip. Expectations start to slip. People get tired, they're stressed, or maybe they just forget. And so it's just a reintroduction of like, these are the expectations. Remember, this is our goal. Remember, this is the procedure. Remember, because we're starting to see things slide. And that could be for anything. It could be instructional. It could be in regards to student behavior, fill in the blank, right? But it's just, if it's important, it needs to be continuously brought up in communication. And I would say in everything that you do, right? If it's something it's a part of the culture that you want, then it needs to be in every touch point that you have with your staff, as like you were talking about, either modeling it or bringing up a new strategy or bringing a guest speaker to talk about it, or having, in every email communication, just a blurb about it. So I just think that you just need to have a lot of touch points. And the more that they see it and the more that it's communicated, the more they realize that it's important. And to go back to something you said earlier, if you're on a campus where they've had principal in, principal out, principal in, principal out, and it's just this revolving door, well, those folks, unfortunately, based on that experience, are going to say, well, this person's not going to be here very long anyway, so I don't have to do anything that they're telling us to do, because they're out the door and then we're going to get a new initiative, right? But if you're trying to really like put down roots and have a culture that's positive and healthy and obviously for student success, then you need to make sure that they understand that you're there for the right reasons. This is important. And they're going to obviously see a benefit on the other end of it if they do everything that's laid out for them.
I think that's 100% spot on. And I might just give one more little piece here.
Let's do it.
Based on what you just said, those touch points, the come back to it. If you really, really want to be great, don't wait until you're starting to see that bubble up and say, oh man, I better have a conversation with my staff about this. Put it on your calendar now. Put it on your calendar for late October for that staff meeting to bring this up again, and put it on the calendar for January, and put it on the calendar for March. Do it now.
I was going to say February.
Then you won't forget. February. Yeah. So do it in January, February, March. Every month, maybe every week. You might need to. But yeah, I love that idea of, hey, just a reminder, or hey, get this on your radar, folks, or don't forget about this. But in order for you to do that, you need to be proactive and get that on your calendar now, so that you're being intentional down the road with, oh yeah, that's right. I remember hearing Darrin and Josh tell me back in August, I needed to do this. That's right. I do need to get to each of my PLCs and remind them whatever it is you might need to remind your PLCs or your content area teams or whatever. I don't know. I just went blank for something.
No, that's right.
I didn't have something that you can remind them of, but I'm sure there's tons.
The calendar is an admin's best friend, so you got to utilize that.
Yes.
All right.
Many administrators would maybe say it's their biggest enemy too. But again, if you're intentional with it,
my biggest
it is
enemy.
your best friend. Yeah, well, that's true. I understand that one.
I could do a whole keynote on that one, Darrin, as far as email is the devil, but we won't go there. As we're winding down, is there any other things that popping up in your head, Darrin, as far as folks that are starting to lay out the school year and, maybe are preparing their staff coming back?
Yeah, I guess the big thing I would tell you is, you don't have to do this alone. No matter what your school is, whether, you're the only administrator and you have 200 kids, or you're the leader of a leadership team of 12, in a really large school, or anything in between. Lean into your team, whatever that team might look like. If you're in a little bitty school, your team might be your secretary and your counselor. That's fine. Your team needs to be aligned. So don't feel like you got to do this all by yourself, but spend the time and be intentional to walk through your expectations, walk through the focus areas, walk through how you're going to speak to these things in the meetings, so that you can get some feedback. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a little bit of a practice run at, oh, here's what I think I want to talk about in this particular topic, and have a couple other people listen to you and tell you, hey, I like this, I don't like this. This is not going to go well if you say that to our staff or whatever, right? Lean into your team, because, clarity is not a one-time thing. It is a continual process, and your team will be your best friend in that particular instance.
Yeah, definitely. I would say too, and maybe we've talked about this before, Darrin, in previous episodes, but just the fact that what you're talking about as far as like, you can't do this work alone, obviously. And we have, me and you, Darrin, have tried to do things on our own and seen the negative effects of that, right?
Yeah.
And I think we've talked before about systems in place to make sure that we're creating boundaries so that we don't get to that point. But just realize that how you feel right now is the best you're going to feel for the rest of the year, because you've just had at least a month off, hopefully doing some fun things with family and friends and getting away and having some relaxation. So just understand that if you don't start now thinking about the construct that you're going to put in place to help your mental health, maybe your physical health, maybe some other things that need to be put in place for you to be your best version every single day for those who you serve, then you're going to find yourself at some point in the year, similar to what Darrin was talking about before, is like waiting until you see the negative effects. Well, the same goes for you as an individual. So start thinking about the plan, start getting your secretary involved, start getting your admin team involved. Like, what are some things that you need to put in place to make sure that you're going to be your healthiest version for the entire school year, and start making those plans and maybe trying some new things out this year that maybe you haven't tried before. If you're a brand new leader, sometimes you don't know what those experiences are going to look like, and so you have to live through that to then put those boundaries in place. But for those who are maybe in the field for 2, 3, 4, 20 years, whatever it may be, you already know what those battles are. You know what needs to be put in place, and this is the time to start that plan.
Outstanding stuff, man. This was so much fun. I look forward to this every year now. It has become a tradition, and so I think we'll just continue to be doing these, but always a lot of fun to hang out with you, to be a part of Aspire to Lead, and to have you on Leaning into Leadership.
Oh my gosh, dude. I feel the exact same way. Darrin, for my audience, I know you're traveling all over this country, supporting leaders, supporting educators, schools, districts. So if they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Probably the best way to get in touch with me, go to the website, roadtoawesome.net, or on social media, I'm Darrin M. Peppard on literally every platform. Josh, same thing. For my audience, if they want to get in touch with you, you're doing a ton of great work all over the country, really focusing right now, especially on the work you did with Charlie Peck with language behavior. How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'll say the same thing. So joshstamper.com is my website. If you want to email me, it's very simple. It's joshua@joshstamper.com. And then on social media, it's typically Joshua_Stamper, because I just want to make it a little difficult for you to find me.
Awesome stuff, man. Hey, get out there and enjoy some of your beautiful Colorado summer. I know you're heading to California here this coming week. And as always, man, just so much fun to hang out with you.
Oh my gosh, the same for you, buddy. And I can't wait for next year to kick this school year off again and do a joint episode. And I just appreciate you so much and all the amazing work that you're doing and just your friendship. You are an amazing person, and I just value you as a human being so much.
Well, thank you, man. It definitely goes both ways.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. We'll see you on the next episode.